Good morning, folks. Welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing on Monday, the 20th of June. I'm Joshua Barry, joined by Jonny McFarlane. Derek is sunning himself in Wales, I think, Jonny, this week. So it's just me and you. How was your weekend?
Yeah, everybody seems to be getting holidays but me. You need to work on this.
You need to take them, mate. You need to take them. Absolutely. We're going to speak a little bit about some stuff we have on the website as ever. But just before we do, a word for our sponsors. OneFootball, as you know, every day is a free football app where you can get all your football needs, particularly important at this time in the transfer window when stuff's breaking at maybe unpredictable times. You can get all your score updates, lineups, news. There's some Rangers review stuff on there as well when the season is in full flow. And if you want to download that just now, the link is in the description, as well as a download link for the Rangers review, which you can also download for free at the moment, Jonny, and get the first 30 days for free, which is excellent value. So do go and check those both out in the comments below the video. Right, we're going to start, Jonny. I think we're going to go right into the headline of the video, which is in relation to an article that we have on the website today. I'm just going to pull it up just now on the screen. And the headline is something along the lines of how Van Bronckhorst has diversified Gerrard's template. And what we mean by that is to go back to a conversation that we've had a lot of times, speaking about Steven Gerrard and the need to maybe do something a little bit different with his tactics this season. Van Bronckhorst has obviously done that. And I'm just going to explain, Jonny, what we've got on the screen and the kind of what it means, because at first glance it can be a bit confusing. But this is an average position map. So what this is the 11 positions that have played the most under Gerrard and Van Bronckhorst in the Scottish Premiership. So just the Premiership. This isn't including Europe, because that I think Van Bronckhorst players would be everywhere, because he's obviously tried so many different kind of setups. But it gives a good picture of what the manager's kind of preferred formation is, what they like to do, how they like the team to line up, and you can see some clear differences, which we're going to just discuss in the first instance, Jonny. But I sent this to you last week, and what was your first reaction to it? Because it's quite maybe as you expected, but there's some interesting elements of it, isn't there?
Yeah, my first reaction was Gerrard and Beale's formation is really remarkably kind of concise and almost, well, I suppose just very, very emblematic of the way they played, with the two sort of wide right and left tens. But to see the fullbacks so equidistant in terms of how far they are forward and things like that, you can tell that they worked a lot on the evolution that took place under those two. In terms of Van Bronckhorst, you really can see the difference that he made in terms of going back to more wide wingers, in terms of seeing that left back pulled back a little bit. That's really, really clear from looking at that graph. And you can see James Tavernier's effectively not really changed position at all. It's marginally further back, but very, very marginally. And he's much closer to the right winger, which should allow interchanges between the two, similar to what the kind of relationship that you had with Candias. Mm-hmm. I don't know, Joshua, the one thing I would say, looking at that, and obviously I'm not the tactical expert that you are, but are you a wee bit worried about the amount of the lack of space there is between those three midfield players in this? Is that ideal?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is, Jonny, and you can see this on the website, folks, if you want to go and check that out, is we also have an average position graph for Van Bronckhorst after his first month, maybe his first 7 or 8 Premiership games. And the midfield's a lot more kind of spaced out. And obviously everyone will remember that this kind of changed a little bit after the Old Firm defeat, moved to more of a Jack and Monster midfield. And I think what the density of that midfield three, as you see, Jonny, because they're almost playing on top of one another, is in response to Van Bronckhorst wanting to put his fullbacks high, but also kind of wanting to keep his wingers high. So you've got to obviously protect the centre of the pitch. I think personally, one of the ways, and you see this a little bit with the left back, just slightly less further forwards and slightly inverted compared to under Gerrard, you will see maybe Barisic or Bassi tuck in a little bit more to free up one of the midfielders to go higher. And we've seen this quite a few times last season, actually. And I think that worked quite well. But is certainly Van Bronckhorst midfield is certainly kind of a far cry from the two free number 8s and one very isolated defensive midfielder, which obviously we've had a lot of content about. And just finally, Jonny, I think the right wing position, we spoke about it. I think every Rangers supporter and every Rangers journalist is sick to the back teeth probably speaking about the need for a right winger. But I think when you see what Van Bronckhorst is trying to do, and this is why I don't think really he will play two forwards next season. Wingers are so important to what he wants to do. And, I personally think if you look at these two winger positions, where Kent is compared to where he was under Gerrard, there's positives and negatives. I think in the 2020-21 season, where Kent scores a lot of goals and he's given a lot of freedom and Rangers play with a good tempo, you see the benefit of him playing inside the pitch. But under Van Bronckhorst, in the second graphic, you can see him isolated out wide and the benefits of that. But and the other interesting one, Jonny, just finally, Alfredo Morelos' position hasn't really changed all that much at all, has it?
No, he's kind of pulled slightly over to the right, which suggests that there's going to be more link-up between him and whoever's on the right, and obviously Tavernier. He's less central than he is under Gerrard. But I would have expected Morelos to be further forward, to be honest, or the centre forward in general to be further forward. And this is obviously just the league games, so you're not really getting that false nine element added into this that came in the Europa League run. So, but the general feeling was that Giovanni Van Bronckhorst had pulled the striker when it was Morelos' side and said, look, get into the box more. You need to be getting up in amongst the action. Whereas under Gerrard, there was this idea that he was going to be doing more of a Robert Firmino thing, where he was dropping back and linking play. And you can see certainly in the Gerrard average position map, he's very, very close to Ryan Kent. There's no one so near him in this model, but I would have expected him to be a bit further forward. But there you go. Sometimes the eye can deceive.
Yeah, and as we discussed a few times last season, I think I wrote an article about this after Rangers beat Hearts 5-0, and the headline was something like Morelos' link play shows that dropping deep wasn't the issue, and it kind of referencing how the way that he dropped deep changes in terms of under Gerrard. And I think the best example of this was a 4-2 win against Ross County last season. Morelos almost was like, I called him an attacking pivot because he was the main creator in a way, in the terms of him switching play, dropping so deep and kind of firing passes from left to right. And actually his creative stats have improved under Van Bronckhorst, but I think that's probably a bit of a result of a new lease of life and maybe some of the coaching, but also the fact that he's maybe playing more bounce passes, being encouraged to attack the box a little bit earlier. And I certainly think, Jonny, that hypothetically, we don't know what's going to happen with Alfredo Morelos, but the most goals he scored in a league season, I think, is 17. Yeah. For me, if he has a full season under Van Bronckhorst, I think he could better that, just because of his scoring rate in the kind of first, maybe 2 months. And there was discussions we were having then about, is this his best spell of his Rangers career? And I think arguably it was, particularly after that second leg against Dortmund. But yeah, I think he could score more than 17 goals. So we'll have to obviously wait and see what happens with the kind of contract talks and whatnot in regards to Morelos. But let's move on to some of that, because I'm sensing a bit of angst in the chat about the lack of signings. Lee Williamson saying real lack of signings is becoming a bit worrying as each day passes. Now the transfer window has been open for a week now, Jonny. I think it was a week. Week today. Should people be worried at no new signings in the door so far?
No, I think everyone needs to just calm down. Rangers have a very, very, very good squad at the moment. A very, very good squad. One of the best that the club's had. Certainly in the modern era. They just got to a Europa League final. And I don't think this squad need much. They need a little, but they don't need much. Now, the reason that everyone thought this would be a rebuild in the summer, a change around, was because there was an assumption that a lot of players would leave. That assumption is an assumption. It's not a fact. So until the Calvin Bassies, the Ryan Kents, the Joe Reavers, this world start leaving, I think that's when the pressure should come for, right, who's coming in? But if these players don't leave, it's as simple as this. Rangers don't need much. They need to provide goals from the right-hand side of the pitch. They need another striker, in my view. but I think you're talking 2 players. If the squad remains the same, 2 players, I don't think you need an awful lot more than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the interesting things, Jonny, is that after the Old Firm defeat in April, the 2-1 defeat where the league was effectively gone, a lot of the narrative was this squad needs a rebuild. I think Aribo had a bad game. Goldson, we obviously thought he was going right up until he actually did sign his contract. But because football changes so quickly, now I agree that the discussion has changed somewhat. But what I would say, and Gareth makes this point as well, the discussion about new blood in the door for the new season. Now, to go back to you on your point, Jonny, I agree that under Van Bronckhorst, I think he getting to the Europa League final as an achievement is so impressive, and I think it would still take time to properly kind of dissect that and what it means and whatnot. But there was a lot of times in the first half last season where that team, I think, played with poor tempo, and we've highlighted this on the website with the kind of the shot timing map, where you looked at certain games and you thought this needs refreshed. But is what you're saying that maybe that at the end of that squad cycle under Gerrard, under a new manager doing something different, that can be the refresh needed instead of the playing squad? Because sometimes it seems to be one or the other. The example I always think of is Pochettino at Tottenham, where they didn't want to refresh the playing squad, so they changed the manager to someone with a different style. Didn't necessarily work, but that seems to be how it works in modern football. 3-4 years, and you either have to change the manager or the playing staff.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right, Josh. I mean, fundamentally for me, in terms of this window, we've got John Davison there saying it closes on the 1st of September. There is absolutely tons of time to go. But I think people need to be realistic and need to remember this. Rangers are yet to qualify for the Champions League. The idea that Rangers are going to go and splash cash around, I don't think makes a lot of sense. You need to understand where your budgets are. Now, at the moment, the club will be budgeting for Europa League group stage qualification because that's what they have. At previous years, they didn't have that guaranteed, so they couldn't even budget for that. So I think you will see an improvement in the playing budget. I think you will see spending. But the difference is across the city, I suppose, and they've not done that much. I mean, they've signed Carter Vickers, who was already on loan. They know they've got the £40 million coming in the door in the Champions League. Rangers have got to get there, and they've got a really tough route. I mean, they could get Monaco in this next round, and that would be a really, really, really difficult one to get past right away.
Yeah.
So you have to be realistic about the kind of finances that are going to be available, and they need to be very, very careful. They need to be tentative. Now, people think, well, they've got to Europa League final last year. They made roughly 40 million. Yes, they did, but it's not always they made 40 million, and therefore 40 million goes into the balance sheet in terms of profit. There's spend associated with all that. Player bonuses, putting on the games at Ibrox, it's not going to be a full 40 million whack. And the club, remember, have gone through a period where they've accumulated quite a lot of losses. They've taken on quite a lot of big projects in terms of the infrastructure of the club. You only need to look at what they're doing with the club museum and how much that's going to cost. There needs to be an appreciation that Rangers is still, building things, still creating things, still working towards the future. And I don't think we're going to see, a couple of £10 million signings rocking through the door. Really don't. This is time, I think, just to take a deep breath and look at the length of time there is to go in this window and just stay calm. No need to panic.
There's some contrasting views. Malky comes in and says, did this team not just lose a 6-point lead in the league? And, that's a very fair point as well. I guess the counter to that would be that maybe with more time, Van Bronckhorst is starting to kind of work out what he needs to do domestically in terms of to beat the teams or win the games that ultimately win the title, Jonny, which is not losing points as Rangers did last season. And I think there was also clear signs in the Old Firm at Hampden and at Celtic Park before the end of the season that he'd learned from the 3-0 defeat back in February. And it's another point here that kind of agrees with that. A lot of people seem to have changed their minds on the rebuild because of the Europa League final. And that's football, that's life, isn't it? You kind of look at the outcome and its changes a lot, especially in football when you're playing so many games.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed there Scott's Wilder saying I've changed my mind on a hard rebuild, and so have I. So have I. And the word I'm using now is reboot. It's a Rangers reboot, not a Rangers rebuild. And it's looking at the lack of goals in the team, because the team's very, very good in other areas. You look at that defence, absolutely fine. You don't need to touch that. If players leave, different story. Right? And that's a caveat to everything I'm about to say. Midfield as well. You've got loads of good quality players in there, loads of choice, loads of different options. To me, it's the key thing to talk about with Rangers is goals.
Mm-hmm.
We've discussed it, and I really, really think we're onto something about getting in a 33 to 35-year-old striker who has just got goals in them. A guy who can come in against St Mirren, a guy who can come in against the lower lights in the league. I don't want to single out any specific players on teams on St Mirren, but you know what I'm talking about. The teams in the bottom six, St Johnstone, St Mirren, the teams that are probably going to be stuck in a relegation battle next year, and score goals and enjoy it and look like they're desperate to get on the score sheet in exactly the same way Jermaine Defoe did. Because Alfredo Morelos, listen, he's been here 5 years. We know what he's like. He loves the big occasion against Celtic, against European teams. You know you're going to get a performance out of him. That's not a problem. But he's not quite the same. And his goal return proves that. He's got a better goal return in Europe than he does in the league. That is utterly bonkers. I don't think there's another Rangers player in history over 25 games or more who has got a better record in Europe than league games. That just doesn't happen. So I think Rangers need someone who will just bang the ball into the back of the net with great happiness, a Chris Boyd-style striker. I think they desperately need that. And then we all know about the right wing position. There's no point in banging on about it. It's just so self-evident. Scott Wright did really well when he came in towards the end of the season, and you hope that he can accelerate his development and continue to play like he did. But they also need someone else. Absolutely someone else. And if they can get someone of Ryan Kent's class, similar quality, it would completely change this team.
Yeah, and there's I think it might be a user called RFC96, something like that, has been saying for about probably a year that Rangers need a Yelovich or a Boyd kind of style striker. So credit.
Oh, not Yelovich, mate. I mean, Yelovich was a different level. I think Yelovich,
in terms of, I think he means just in terms of someone that will score a lot of goals, and obviously that's a commodity. Yeah. That's a commodity, but certainly, again, to go back to 2019-20, Rangers were at a very different stage. But I think if you look at their shortcomings, the type of games they struggled to the type of games they struggled to win. Okay, and a lot of people going into lockdown would have said, you need to revamp this team going into the next season. You need to tear it up, but they didn't. They just needed to add what it needed, which was goals and assists in key areas. They didn't need to rip up the template.
Yeah, and I think there also needs to be a cognizance and awareness that Alfredo Morelos and Kemar Roof are, if they don't go anywhere, they're playing. Morelos is going to start, and Roof's going to play a lot of games as well when he's fit. And they're both very, very, very good players. I'm a big fan of Kemar Roof. So you need someone that's going to be able to come in and deliver without having that stress of, like, why am I not playing every game? Why am I not playing in Europe? You can't go and get a 28-year-old or a 26-year-old or even a 22-year-old who's on the rise and say to them, and by the way, you're not playing.
Yeah.
That was the absolute genius of Jermaine Defoe. And I think Rangers need to fill that gap. And that's why Bas Dost, for me, was such a brilliant shout-out by whoever it was that shouted it out on this. Because when we went and looked at it, I just very, very basically looked at the stats and thought, wow, he's available on a 33-year-old. 12 starts last season and 11 goals in the Belgian top flight. And most of his appearances came off the bench. That is exactly what Rangers need, especially with his physical profile. I'd love to see them sign Bas Dost. Someone else saying there, Lawrence Shankland. Lawrence Shankland's available. I don't think that would be a terrible signing. I've got to be honest, I think it'd be a very good signing. Big Rangers fan, great finisher, good link-up player, cheap. I don't think that's a terrible signing either.
Okay. The other thing I was going to speak about was, and when you're looking at the difference, I think this year and last year, obviously last season, who knows who Rangers would have brought in had they made it past Malmo. There was obviously noises surrounding certain players, but you'd imagine that there would have been investment.
Veerman would have come in. I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure of that. I'm pretty sure. I know Rangers were really, really interested in Veerman. Yeah. It was going to be an expensive deal. So I think he definitely would have been one of the players that would have come in. But
right. And this season, you look at it, and I'm sure the board will be thinking, if Van Bronckhorst can navigate his way to a European final, he can navigate his way past 2 rounds of qualifiers. And I mean, that's a very appetizing kind of potential, isn't it? That you look at a manager that's done that in Europe. It could not work as in last season under Gerrard. But I think Malmo was quite a unique situation in terms of, again, we spoke about this 100 times, but the way they played against Rangers system, the fact that they were 10 games into their season at that point, and that period after half time where Rangers really needed to kind of control the game, and Malmo went and scored 2 times. So just finally, Jonny, I mean, on this whole discussion of reboot, when players come in, dealing with contracts, which you'd imagine would be the priority in this instance. Do you think the board is sitting there? Of course, they're not going to budget for the Champions League because they're not in it, and there's no guarantee they will get in it. But do you think they're sitting there more confident than they were last season about getting into the Champions League?
I think they've got a right to be confident. However, I don't think you can say they can be more confident than last season, because they had the Champions route last season, which is significantly easier on paper than the route Rangers have now. And you see the teams that Rangers could get, and there are some really, really, really tough teams in that early stage. So I don't think you can say they can be more confident, because it's going to be more tough. But Rangers are better, and Rangers have proven in the Europa League that they are a very good team, and no one will want Rangers. People will look at Rangers and go, "Oof, you can get them in the third qualifying. That's a nightmare." So I can see where that question comes from. But fundamentally, Josh, if Rangers qualify from the Champions League through this route, it will be one of the biggest achievements that the club has made at a European level in the last 20 or 30 years, in my lifetime, basically watching the club, because this is notoriously difficult to come in as a second place team in the Scottish League. It's going to be very, very tough. And I think people need to realise that this is it's a similar scenario to when Steven Gerrard walked in 2018, and he had 4 qualifying rounds to get to the Europa League. It's, given where the team was then, it's a kind of similar scale of a challenge. And Gerrard overcame it, and Giovanni Van Bronckhorst may well overcome it. But it's going to be real difficult, mate, especially if you get a bad draw. I mean, a Monaco, for example, towards the end of July, early August, that's going to be real difficult. Really, really, really difficult to overcome.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, remember, folks, you can subscribe and get a free trial at the Rangers Review. The link is in the description. Go over and read some of the content that we've had over the weekend and today. We'll be back tomorrow morning, and remember, throughout the week we'll have lots and lots of content on anything that develops, any transfers, any links, but also looking ahead to the reboot, as Jonny calls it, and giving you top quality Rangers content every day. So do go and check that out. We'll speak to you tomorrow morning. Until then, enjoy the rest of your Monday.